Welcome back. Chapters 33 through 35 represent a deep change in Cervantes' narrative style. This shift has already been announced. Cardenio's and Dorotea's stories were already dissimilar from Don Quixote's, but what follows is a more comprehensive and self-contained version of the literary genre that Cervantes himself would call the exemplary novel, which manifests a certain moral lesson, but not without some rather scandalous entertainment. This genre might also be termed Baroque urbane. What's important to appreciate is that Cervantes masters all types of novel. He outlines the chivalric novel in Don Quixote's Fantasies. He produces the essence of the pastoral in Grisostomo and Marcela, and he replicates sentimental and Byzantine novels in Cardenio's and Dorotea's tales. At the same time, he parodies all of these forms via multiple echoes of the anti-sentimental novel La Celestina. And we have seen the subversive realism of the picaresque in the episodes involving Ginés de Pasamonte and Maritornes, where it undercuts epic allusions to the Cid as well as Homer, Virgil, and Dante. Now we confront a kind of hyper-melodrama. The novel of the Curious Impertinent is essentially a love novel, heavy with psychopathology, mystery, betrayal, and revenge. Its interpersonal dynamism sets it apart from the rest of Don Quixote. Here Cervantes suspends his meta-literary games and ribald humor and narrates in an elegant, traditional way, as well as any author then or since. We might compare what Cervantes does here to rock bands like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, or The Who during their most radical and innovative periods would still take the time to produce an occasional perfect, catchy pop song. The novel is set in Florence, where the Renaissance originated, before spreading its rediscovery of classical culture throughout Western Europe. Keep in mind the intimate political context between Florence and Toledo, between the Habsburgs and the Medici. The plot derives from a traditional story, but it also reflects Canto 43 of Ariosto's Orlando Furioso. We should also acknowledge anticipations of Hegelian and Freudian theory here. The tragic falls of the main characters represent the hopelessly conflicted essence of human beings in general. Thus, the opening scene establishes an almost perfect harmony between two male characters. Everyone in Florence refers to Anselmo and Lothario by antonomasia and par excellence as quite simply the two friends. And their wills were in such perfect unison that a more synchronized clock had never been invented in all the world. The only difference between them is that Anselmo was slightly more inclined toward amorous pursuits than Lothario, who was more drawn to those of hunting. The infinite army of Cervantine hunters. Anselmo fell in love with Camilla, whose name alludes to the Italian heroine of Virgil's Aeneid, in which she fights alongside Turnus against Aeneas, and her murder is avenged by the goddess Diana. Lothario served as ambassador for this relationship. Remember the problematic roles played by Sancho and Don Fernando with respect to Don Quixote and Cardenio. Camilla and Anselmo married, and Lothario then stopped frequenting his friend's house in order to preserve the couple's reputation, their public honor. Anselmo became annoyed, insisting that Lothario continue his visits, assuring him that his wife Camilla had no other wish or aspiration, voluntad, than that which he wanted her to have. Given the centrality of the aspirations and willpowers of women like Marcela, Torralba, Lucinda, Dorotea, and Aldonza Lorenzo, this statement by Anselmo is thematic and ominous. Lothario makes excuses, saying that every husband must have a friend to make him aware of any missteps regarding his person, but Anselmo ignores him. At this point, we have a sophisticated intervention by the narrator, who brandishes both the first person and the free and direct style. But where could one find so discreet a friend, one as loyal and true as Lothario here describes? Surely, I do not know. During this phase of their friendship, when Lothario was still avoiding the home of the newly married Anselmo, one day They both went walking through a meadow outside the city, and Anselmo confessed to his friend that he felt anxiety, a distress, angustia in Spanish. He even calls it an insanity, locura. The desire that weighs me down is my wondering whether or not Camila, my wife, is as good and perfect as I imagine her to be. And I cannot verify this truth except by testing her with such a test as to make manifest the purity of her goodness, just as fire reveals whether gold contains alloys. In short, the good reputation of Camila was not enough without anyone ever having tempted her, and Anselmo has chosen Lotario to undertake this battle of love. Lotario now protests at length. His concatenating style reflects the era's education, which used debates over the nature and limits of concepts like friendship and fidelity to perfect the rhetorical and legal skills of students. Lotario produces a variety of classical, logical, and moral arguments, including examples from the Bible, nature, poetry, and even military life. To indicate the divine limits to friendship, he begins by quoting a phrase that Plutarch attributed to Pericles, usque ad aras, or until the altars. The complete phrase is amicus usque ad aras, meaning a friend as far as the altars. Then Lotario accuses Anselmo of reasoning like the Moors, who are unable to accept Euclid's third common notion. If we subtract equal parts from two equal parts, then those that remain are also equal. Okay, this is more than just rhetorical exercise. We have mathematical reasoning up against the limits of religion between two practically identical young men. We have yet another allegory for human conflict, especially that of southern Spain.